Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Black Girl Ambition with me, Nia Baxter. This is your go-to space for community empowerment and practical tips to help you level up in your career and in all aspects of your life. Black Girl Ambition is not just a podcast, it is a movement. Think executive level coffee chat meets sister circle meets motivational masterclass. You can find Black Girl Ambition on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite streaming platform. If you love these conversations, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share Black Girl Ambition with a friend. Okay, ambitious Black girls. Today we are speaking with Tai Wingfield. Tai also happens to be a very close friend of mine of, what's that, Tai, 25 years?
I know, it sounds so old. We met when we were one.
We met when we were one, and now we're here. Tai is the global workplace experience and responsible business lead at a tech company. She's also held numerous executive leadership roles at global PR firms and diversity think tanks, as well as co-authored the book Ambition in Black and White, The Feminist Narrative Revised, which explores Black women's pursuits of powerful jobs and the barriers in the workplace that can stand in the way of our ambitions. But today we're going to be diving into a very specific topic, the topic of negotiation, which is important to all of us. Because of our friendship, I have specific insight into how Tai has sharpened her approach to negotiation. And I brought her on to share some practical tips and strategies with all of you to help you get to the bag and claim what we're worth with clarity and with confidence and with strategy. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here today, Tai.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Tai, you come across as approachable. You are very grounded. You are also very nice, but your negotiation mindset is sharp, shrewd even. I would like to know how you developed your approach to negotiation. And before you get into the question or the answer to the question, I have posed this because that niceness, that desire to be liked, can get in the way of us asking for what we deserve, asking for what we know that we want. And so I'm curious how you balance those two things when you enter negotiation conversations.
Yeah. And thanks for having me today. You know, negotiation has been a huge part of my professional journey, learning to claim what I'm worth with confidence and clarity. It's really transformed not just my career, but my life. And so I really hope that this conversation today encourages all of your listeners and viewers to really step into their own power and worth unapologetically. It's interesting because I was raised like many women to respect, those who are in power, to, be approachable, and also just naturally a part of my personality is nice and I'm empathetic. And so, pushing back or conflict is very uncomfortable for me. It always has been. It still is. It's something that I grapple with daily. But as I've grown and matured in my own career and I've learned from mentors and sponsors, asking for what I'm worth is not being combative or aggressive. It's about understanding what I deserve. It's about clarity and being prepared and having self-respect. And so I've learned how to still authentically show up as myself and not compromise who I am, but also ask for what I want. And it's been, these are lessons I've learned over time. It takes a lot of practice. It still takes practice, but understanding that I deserve equitable treatment and compensation, importantly. So I've had to shift a lot from self-doubt to self-assurance. And that's really been key. Where I am currently in my own life's journey, I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I have financial responsibilities outside of myself. And so because again, this is uncomfortable for me. It's not natural. I psych myself out and I go into conversations mentally, just understanding this isn't about me. Asking for more money, what I'm worth, what I deserve, what I've earned will also have an impact on my ability to provide for my family, my ability to provide for my loved ones, to give them, right, a different and better life. And so I try as much as I can in that way to take myself out of it, because I find personally, right, this won't work for everyone, but going in and negotiating on behalf of my son, on behalf of my husband, makes that process a little easier for me. So I think it's important to understand that a lot of Black women carry this legacy of societal and systemic undervaluing, which can lead to hesitation in any, asking for a title, asking for money. There's a fear of backlash or of being perceived as difficult, which is real, right? It's not just a perception. We know that this is true and it happens. But I've learned that our strength really lies in approaching negotiations with purpose and conviction. So it's rewiring those sort of narratives that we have and recognizing our own inherent worth. That paired with, this isn't just about me, it's about those that I love. And that makes me feel kind of armed going in and confident. That on top of knowing that I'm excellent at my work, that even though everyone is replaceable to an extent, I can be replaced, but you will not replace me with someone at the same level of quality and experience that I bring to the table. So I go in with that kind of level of awareness, but knowing that I deliver, that I'm qualified, that I'm excellent, also gives me that self-assuredness that I'm asking for what I deserve. I'm not asking for a favor or for a handout. The other thing that I think is really important going into some of these conversations is knowing that you have a safety net. And as Black women, a lot of times in the workplace, we have mentors, we have people that we can go to give us that unvarnished advice, but we really need a safety net. We need one or two individuals who, if we go in and negotiate and it falls flat, they have our back, right? We're not sort of setting ourselves up for failure. We have someone who can go in and advocate on our behalf before we walk in the room. They've already set the stage for the ask that we're going to present. And so having individuals in the workplace, if you're a business owner, having clients or others that you work with who can vouch for you and who can provide that safety net and advocacy is also key to winning in a lot of these negotiations.
That's really interesting. So I'm hearing a couple things. One, it's conviction about what you bring, your skill set, your talents, what you deliver. You have the receipts, you've shown the receipts, and having that conviction. It's also taking yourself out of the equation, like decentering yourself in the negotiation conversations. And we can all do that to some extent, even if we don't have children.
And even, outside of, right, your personal, like if you have personal dependents, but just if I go in and negotiate for what I deserve and I make this the norm of how people who look like me show up, my ideal is that it will make it easier for the next woman who comes behind me to come in and do the same thing, right? I'm putting that blueprint in place. And so that is also top of mind. I need to go in and chip away these barriers and these perceptions of who we are and how we show up to make it easier for the next person, whether that next person is my son, whether it's someone I'll never meet who is coming in and is as deserving for that raise or that promotion.
Since I've been having these Black Girl Ambition conversations, there's definitely a recurring theme that comes up with the women that I talk to. And it's often about building foundations. I heard you say blueprint, and my guest a couple of episodes ago, Amira Barger, used the word foundations, wanting to make it easier, lay a foundation, provide a blueprint for the generations coming after us. And I aspire to do the same thing. So something else I want to come back to really quickly. You mentioned some internal narratives that you used to have about negotiation. What are one or two of those internal narratives that you had to throw out the window because they were not helpful?
that I'm
Mm.
not ready for. And I think in that same vein, well, the people above me know when I'm ready, or they know when it's time. So they'll make that decision. When they make that decision, that's when I've earned it. I've deserved it. And time again, as go through corporate America or anywhere in life, you see other people who are not as good, or not as smart, are not as strong, as hardworking, and they continue to move up. They continue to advocate for themselves, and they get what they ask for. And so when you see that happen time and time again, you start to wonder, one, I understand my worth. I understand my value. I cannot rely on my manager knowing my worth. Oftentimes managers, one, aren't trained to be managers. They're looking out for themselves. And so if you aren't making yourself heard, if you aren't making yourself seen, if you aren't speaking up on behalf of the work and saying, hey, by the way, I did X, Y, and Z, and that made us X number of dollars year over year, it can be out of sight, out of mind. And so understanding how to advocate for yourself was a huge learning for me in my career, and not waiting for someone else to tell me that I'm ready, but understanding that I'm ready and speaking up for myself. And I mean, honestly, our gauge of what readiness looks like, I think, is, as Black women in particular, we are so used to thinking that we need to check every single box, that we have to be perfect. 100% of the criteria needed at the next level we need to meet. And that is not true. I see all the time, I see other employees moving up the ranks when they've met maybe half of the criteria, when they have the potential. We see potential in this person, so let's go ahead and promote them and give them the chance. Whereas I've always thought I have to already be operating in that next role. I have to already check every single box, and then I'm ready. And that's shifted over time. You lose a lot in thinking that way and thinking as if you need to be perfect, but knowing that he can do it, I can go into that role. I know I can kill it. And I'm going to advocate for myself. Negotiating and advocating for yourself does not mean the answer will always be yes. And so there is also some preparation that you do in advance of any type of negotiation, whatever it is, even if you're advocating for a stretch opportunity. You need to understand and have your own non-negotiables of what am I willing to walk away from? If the answer is no, or if the answer is not satisfactory, do I walk away from this job opportunity? Do I leave my current job? Am I prepared to leave my current job? Those are also areas that realistically you have to think about. If you are dependent on income to live day to day, I would never advise that you go in and risk it all without a plan in place if it doesn't work out to your advantage. That's also a lot of the preparation that I do going into a negotiation about, I expect this salary, or this happened and I'm expecting X. If the answer is no, is this something that I walk away from?
What are some of the specific research or preparation that you do before walking into a negotiation? And I want to frame it in two different ways, because when I think about negotiation, I think about a new job, obviously, like you're leaving one job and you're going to a new role, new company. That's like fresh start. And then there is the other type of negotiation where you were already at a company and then you are advocating for a new role, a new position. Perhaps you just feel that you're underpaid. There's like within role or within same company negotiation that happens. What are some of the practical ways that you prepare to go into those sorts of conversations?
Yeah, I think some of it is the same, regardless of,
Mm.
if you're asking for a new role in your existing company, if you're applying for a new role, you always start by doing your homework and understanding what the market rates are. What is the kind of standard rate at a company at that size, given the remit that you have or the team that you're overseeing? Is it global? Is it a domestic role? So you need to look at all of that holistically, so that you have some level of comparison around market rate, market value. But layer into that your unique value. I remember applying for a role, and it was a role that was somewhat outside of the scope of my existing work. But I brought a unique value and the skill set that I had applying for that role than I think a lot of the other applicants had going into it. I had an extensive background in communications and change management and marketing. And this was for a role in D&I where a lot of the typical applicants had a strong background in HR, which I didn't have. And so playing up my unique value add would be in that role, how that could be a differentiator, how it sets me apart from other applicants was huge. And so I underscored that a lot. I compared it to the job description and what additional value or unique value I could bring to the table. So that's another part of it. Understand what the general market is, but then understand your uniqueness and the company's priorities. What is it that they're trying to achieve or fix or grow? And how can you come in and commit to that? There was another role that I was applying for within a consulting firm. And I was coming in and proposing that I start a new practice, a practice that didn't exist at that firm or any other firm at the time. And so I came in and not only proposed the practice and the value that I saw around it in terms of growing clients, but I also came in with clients already ready to sign up if I moved into this new role. And so I was bringing in unique value in several ways, existing business. So the risk of starting this was minor because we had business coming in the door, but also as new market opportunity that would help set this agency apart from some of our competitors and peers. Thinking about that gives you a lot of additional wiggle room in terms of what the ask is. And I also always say, go in, understand the market value, and then mark that up by, X%. And usually you'll land somewhere in the middle, but typically above kind of what the base is. And layering in your unique value, I think just makes you all around like a much stronger candidate.
That's very tactical and very helpful. And I'm hearing a couple things. So you're not just asking. It's not just throwing numbers out there. You're asking and you're making a proposition based on the company's priorities, based on the unique value that you bring, and based on the research that you've done of what the role commands in the market. And combining those are what leads to the specific ask.
Absolutely. That's right.
I want to get into a short story. Tai, a couple of years ago, shared a story with me that still has me flabbergasted for a number of reasons. She discovered that her direct report was coming in, being hired to the company, making as much money as her. And this person was subordinate to her on the team. Obviously was shocked by this, as was Tai. I know that you navigated that in a very strategic way that led to the outcome that you were looking for. Talk a little bit more about what you did.
Yeah, this was kind of a page turner for me in terms of just my own career and how I show up and how I ask for what I deserve. This was a very pivotal moment in my career. As you mentioned, I discovered the pay gap when I casually checked the report and saw that my incoming direct report, who, by the way, no knock on her, had advocated for herself and negotiated well, right? But I think it's also telling that I was not in the room for that negotiation for someone who would be reporting into me. So that gives you a little bit of sense of kind of the power dynamic in the organization that I was working in at the time. But I saw that she was coming in earning the same salary as me, despite my longer tenure, my additional responsibilities. And so that moment was a wake up call. It was by accident. And I think there's a lot to be said around the laws that we see being passed in New York and other states around pay transparency. It's so critical. This was an organization that had very little to no pay transparency. I had really no insight around what the level above me, that average looked like in terms of the pay scale. So it was really hard to advocate for yourself when you don't have an understanding of the market value. So that also really set apart for me just how important it is to understand market value. But it was a wake-up call. I scheduled a private conversation with my then manager. I approached that conversation with curiosity and facts, expressed that I wanted to ensure fair compensation for my contributions. And I remember at the time, this was during COVID. So I was sharing a home office with my husband, and he heard the entire exchange. of when I learned, that this woman was coming in making my same salary. And it was great to have that accountability partner in the moment. And I think that's another kind of interesting piece. Talk to your friends, talk to your mentors before you go in and advocate for yourself, because you feel that even if you're nervous and you want to back down, someone else is out there holding you accountable and will ask, did you ask for this? Did you show up? Did you? And so he sat there, and I remember hanging up, and he came over to my desk and said, so, you need to reach out to your manager now and address this now, not next week, not tomorrow. Address it now and ask for what you deserve. And so I had an accountability partner. My salary impacts him as well. And so I spoke very openly, and my manager was well aware that I had learned of my direct report's salary. And, to be honest, she did not have a great answer for me at the time. Unbeknownst to her and myself, the timing just worked out. I had another offer on the table for higher than my salary at the time. So I was prepared to walk if I needed to. I hadn't planned that, but that's something now that I always sort of keep in the back of my mind. So I had another offer, but I loved my role. I loved my job. There was still a lot I wanted to accomplish in that role. So I wasn't ready to walk. I was prepared to, I didn't want to. And I spoke with some mentors of mine. I spoke with mentors that I've known almost my entire career. One was a Black woman, one was a white man. And it was really interesting, the different counsel that I got from both parties. So the white man, and this was similar to some of the counsel that I got from my husband, who was a Black man, go in and ask for way higher than what your existing offer is. Ask for more than that. Ask for equity in the company, which is something I'd never even conceived of at the time or thought about. I didn't know if my company offered equity. Again, there was no pay transparency. Yes, in fact, they did. I never knew to ask about it and never thought about asking for that. Wow. Ask for more than that. And the counsel that I got from another woman who's a Black woman was, one, she was proud, right, of the position that I was in, and in terms of being able to ask for more, having another offer on the table. But she was a bit more cautious. We are Black women, be prepared to walk. I think that's a lot to ask. That salary is extremely high. It's above market value. And that was also coming from a very real place. We know from research that women, Black women in particular, are seen much more harshly when they do show up and negotiate and ask for what they deserve. And so I, in my mind, balanced all of that feedback. At the end of the day, I went in and I asked for equity. I asked for a salary that was above market value, that was above what was being offered to me from another company. And I felt confident in doing that because I had a safety net. I had that other offer on the table. But I got what I asked for, all of it. The feeling that I had coming out of that, as nervous as I was going into it, as uncomfortable as I was, I felt empowered. I felt strong. And I also vowed to myself in that moment that I will never be in a position like that again. One, where I don't know what's being offered, where I don't have some level of understanding of what the pay bands look like above me and below me, and that I will never find myself in a position where I don't feel that I could walk or I don't have that safety net in place. And so since then, I've always ensured that my network is warm, that I keep in touch with all of my contacts, and I'm in constant conversation with recruiters, even when I'm not looking. That's good hygiene professionally. Always know what's out there. If you're not looking, still know what the market is looking for. I go in and I understand my value, and I also ensure that I understand what my unique value is in any role that I'm in, so that when there comes a time to negotiate, and it may not be salary, it may be additional PTO, it may be additional RSUs, it may be working remotely an additional day a week. Regardless of what the ask is, I feel prepared. I understand I've done my homework. I know I'm showing up. I'm excellent. But I also have these other safety nets in place professionally, so that if I fail, if the answer is no, I can walk and still be okay.
That is such a powerful story with so many practical strategies. So I hope y'all were taking notes. First, can you tell me, what are RSUs?
Yes, yes. So RSUs are a restricted stock unit. It's a form of employee compensation. A company grants you or promises you grants of shares of its stock. And so again, as we think about negotiating, you can negotiate base salary, but also look at negotiating your signing bonus, which I did my existing role.
I was actually going to ask you about that. What are the different things? Because we think about salary, but salary is really just one part of a compensation package. And you mentioned in your story that you didn't even know that your company was offering equity. So I find so many times Black women don't know what we don't know. What are the options? So there's RSU.
Yes.
There's equity. Obviously, there's base compensation. You mentioned signing bonus, PTO, additional
Bonuses.
PTO, bonuses.
Companies have different bonus structures. Are strictly merit based. Some are based on, if you're in a consulting firm, amount of business that you bring in. Some bonuses are based on company performance or a combination of merit and company performance. And so, especially with the percentage based on merit, you can negotiate what that looks like for you. PTO is another area. Even the ability to travel. If you need to restrict travel because you have priorities at home that, restrict, how often you can be away from home. Those are all things that you can negotiate to ensure that you feel you're getting the best package possible based on your market value. To think about it holistically. And I did not know that earlier in my career. A lot of my family members and my social network growing up, a lot of the adults weren't in corporate roles. They were all working, educated adults, but these structures are new. And so I didn't grow up with someone guiding me on, how much equity to ask for or signing bonuses. It's something I've learned along the way, but now that I know it and I can share it with you and with your viewers and listeners, these are all things we should take into consideration when we're applying for, or even when we're in role and we're negotiating for.
Yes. I believe that the transparency is so important, and it really only serves corporations when there's that lack of transparency, because I don't believe that you can ever count on a company to be equitable in the way that it distributes its pay in any way. So I think that transparency is really important. I mean, one, from like a policy perspective, I look at New York and the way that there are laws where they have to advertise a salary range. But in cases where that does not happen, transparency among our network, like even our peers and our friends. I'm curious about what you think about this. My entire life, I have been told it is taboo to talk money. You don't talk about it. I just grew up that way. And I grew up socialized. I don't talk about it with my family. I don't talk about it with my friends. And I think that it puts us at a disservice, especially when there are all of these other barriers from negotiation standpoint that we encounter. So like, what's your perspective on transparency with your friends?
Yes.
And your peers.
I mean, I grew up the same way as you. You don't talk about money. You don't share what you have. It can be viewed as bragging, or you don't want anyone to know all of your business. And while some of that is true, right, to a certain extent, if you have friends, especially friends who are in similar industries or are situated similarly in terms of their tenure and level, it's so important to have these open conversations with them. If you can't talk to your friends about pay, about what you're navigating at work, who else can you talk to? It's so vague in an organization. It's hard to understand who you can trust. And I think, if you have those individuals inside of a company who you can trust, you understand you can be open with one another. What you share doesn't get out. I mean, that is such a blessing to have. But you have that with your friends who are also likely sitting in other companies and other organizations. So I think having that transparency is so important. It puts us in a stronger position of power to know that. Also to know that you have your community. I had lunch with a friend last week and we caught up on everything, including how to navigate tricky situations at work. And it was just so mind-blowing and such a relief leaving that conversation, feeling like I've contributed to her and helping her navigate the week ahead and some tricky situations that she was, working through at work. And similarly, I had so much that I gained from her in that conversation and how I could approach things at work, doors that were opened and have been opened through friends introducing me to other contacts professionally. And so use your friendships. I've seen my husband and his friend circle. They've talked about it. He's given them tips on how to negotiate. I think it's so important to have. That is such an important part of showing up for your friends, being open and transparent.
Absolutely. And I want us as Black people to have more of a community oriented mindset when we think about climbing the corporate ladder or founding new businesses. Like, it is about, of course, us, but there is so much in pulling up others as we climb too, and sharing those strategies, sharing the tools and the tips. And I just think that when I've seen some of us adopt a really individualistic mindset when it comes to, like, I've got it, so I'm just going to keep it to myself and not share it. And, I think that some of those narratives, concepts are also perhaps generational. Like, I've seen more of a communal approach to the climb for our generation and the ones coming after. But there was something else that you said. I wrote them down. So when you were talking about your story, you were telling your story, there was also a gender element, like from the men that you were receiving advice from versus the Black woman that you received advice from. I think that society often tells women to self-edit, Black women especially, to edit, to go for less, to ask for less, that we're not ready. Someone will tell us when we're ready, all of the self-editing. And I think because that reality exists, we just shouldn't edit ourselves. Like, I don't need someone else to do that for me. Just go for it. You're going to encounter barriers anyway. I don't think that we have to place any of them on ourselves. I took that away from your story too.
And I knew this story, but I read it again recently, and it reminded me of this conversation. And it was the Shonda Rhimes story, and I can't remember the network she was at. Maybe it was CBS. I don't remember. But she, of course, she's Shonda Rhimes. She's making tons of money for the network, showing up. She's creative. There's no one like Shonda Rhimes. And I think she was asking for, I don't know if it was a higher salary or she was negotiating. And the offer that came back were tickets to Disneyland for her kids. Something that, like,
I read this somewhere.
What?
Yes.
And she, was offered that. And it wasn't even the offer itself. I think the head of the network said, she complained, like, this isn't what I'm asking for. And I can buy out the park myself for my kids. I don't need tickets to Disneyland. And what did it was the head of the network coming back saying, you already have all of this. What else do you want? And so with that, she took her unique value add, her creativity, her innovation, and she went to Netflix.
And she walked.
Good for her.
Yes.
Good for her. And she could, right? She is in a very different position of power than I am at this stage in my career. But I think for anybody, you can have that takeaway. My unique value add to my current company, to past companies, is unique. I bring something new and different and creative. And yes, I need a job. I love having a career, but they also need me. They need my skill set and my strengths and my creativity. Yes, I am replaceable, but you will not find someone else like me. And I think if everyone comes to the table in that way, knowing, of course, baseline is you are excellent. You do provide and produce quality work. But, having that sort of baseline there, always being prepared to walk. They're not respecting what I bring to the table. They aren't recognizing it. I don't need to bring my talent and my unique skill set here. I can take it elsewhere. And I think that story, I remind myself of that constantly. You're never stuck. You can always figure out the next step. It may not be that day. You may not be prepared that day to walk, but you get a sense of where your company is, what they're willing or not willing to do in terms of honoring and valuing your unique value add. And you put a plan in place to stay and grow there or to move somewhere else.
I was searching on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, and I saw a video from someone that was talking about negotiation and how to get When the range is advertised, it's very tricky. Let's say the range is, it's between $100,000 and $200,000. And so when someone asks you, what is your salary? And you know the range, what question to use to get to the most? And this person said, ask the recruiter, what is the difference between a $100,000 candidate and a $200,000 candidate, and have that recruiter give you the specific skills required. Then you show up, because likely you're already meeting all of the skills that are needed, right? The experience, the education, the skill set. And so that's the question that you frame in order to get the most out of the salary range, because those can be really, really tricky. So I'm curious if there are other like tactical questions that you use.
I think that's exactly it. It's so part of doing your homework, part of understanding the market value is exactly that, right? You're doing your online research, but I think it's important to ask someone else who is in a similar position at another company that you know, someone in your network, get their sense of it, but also ask the recruiter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a fair question to ask that, will not set you up for failure. You will not be positioned poorly if you ask sort of what does this range entail? I think it is a fair question to ask. I think, again, on top of the market value, what your unique value is then, right? So if the difference between $100,000 and a $200,000 candidate is the $200,000 candidate will have global experience. They would have lived and worked in other markets and they're bringing that to the table versus, the $100,000 candidate who's maybe only worked in the US. Okay, that's fair. But maybe you have that global experience. Maybe you didn't live in another market, but you've managed teams in other markets. You've traveled extensively. Your remit is global. I think then understanding what to play up as you're asking for that higher end of the salary range is important, but understanding what falls within that range is critical, and share your impact, right? So curate your experience to the salary that you're asking for. And again, if you're asking for above that range, if it's, the top end of the range is 200 and you're asking for 250, or you're asking for 200 plus, a signing bonus plus equity in the company, be prepared to speak to why you are a candidate who should be paid above market and what impact you will bring to the organization as a result. So again, I think it's bring your data, share your impact, highlight your readiness to take on more.
Mm-hmm.
So positioning yourself as a top candidate who warrants the upper end of the range.
So I remember in a prior conversation, we were talking about how you position yourself for salary increases year over year. And that is, I think you said, documenting your goals,
Yes.
reviewing those with your manager, documenting your accomplishments against those goals throughout the year, and having transparency around your progress. So at the end of the year, there shouldn't be a surprise.
No surprise. That is the name of the game.
Is that your approach to it?
Yes, but so there are organizations that I've worked in that have very clear performance criteria. So, if you're vying for the next role or a raise, these are the areas that I need to check or have mastered that everyone is evaluated against throughout the year. You're meeting with your manager. What's harder is when you work within an organization that doesn't have as clearly set criteria for what raise warrants or what warrants a raise or what warrants a promotion. And that takes a lot more, I think, communication with not just your manager, but also with your sponsors and mentors, those people around you who can also speak out on your behalf throughout the year about what you're delivering, the value that you bring to the company, the value that you bring to different teams or even your direct reports, and getting clarity, I think, at the beginning of the year or whenever your performance cycle starts from your manager. I want to be, my next step over the next 12 months is to be promoted into X role. You and I need to sit down and design together what that path looks like. Is it a viable path? Do we have room to make another promotion at the end of the year? Get all of that information at the beginning so that, and especially if your company doesn't have clear criteria set, you are setting that openly and importantly, documenting that, sharing it with HR. We've had this discussion. We've talked about it. We've agreed that if I meet these things, we will discuss my promotion or my merit increase, in 12 months, 9 months down the line. But being very open and direct with your manager about what your expectations are. And I think asking them very directly, is this a viable path for me here?
Mm.
And again, if the answer is no, or we think you're great, but we aren't in a position as a company to promote more people into this level of a role. And then you make a decision for yourself. You have the information. You decide this is the company I want to stay and grow in, or I will start looking for my next opportunity.
Yes. Yes. What do you wish more Black women knew when it comes to negotiating for what they deserve?
That your voice is powerful. You're powerful. Your worth is undeniable. And negotiation is a skill that you can develop. It's something that you practice to get more comfortable with it. But at the end of the day, it's about your dignity. It's about your future. It's about the future of others who are coming up the ranks as well. So own that.
What is your greatest ambition?
I think similar to yours, Naya, through the platform that you're building here, it's to continue to break barriers, to help elevate other Black women, create spaces where our value is recognized, that we're compensated fairly. That is a big reason why a majority of my career has been spent in some way in the inclusion space. It's about fairness. It's about equity. It's about ensuring that all of our brilliance and serving and that we're working within. I want us to all walk in rooms knowing exactly what we deserve and demanding it.
Tai, where can my listeners find you on socials if they want to get in contact?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Tai Wingfield. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook under Tai Wingfield or Tai Green Wingfield.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So that is it for this episode of Black Girl Ambition, where we dream big and we move boldly and we build legacy on our own damn terms. If today's conversation spoke to you, please share it with a friend, leave me a review, and do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.
Overzealous when I'm thinking about the cash flow. I never had no handouts, just came natural. I've been testing so much, all these wrestlers nice.